Labor Day, Labor Day. Focus question. Why is Labor Day important? Back to school. In the United States, Labor Day is the first Monday in September. It's time to enjoy one last blast of summer fun before the school year starts for many American children. Many businesses and all government offices are closed for the day. Some people get the day off work and might throw a party. Labor Day isn't just a day to take it easy, though. It's also a day the U.S. government set aside to honor the achievements of American workers, past and present. To understand what Labor Day honors, it's important to learn about the labor movement. This movement involved workers joining together to improve the way they work and live. Machines and workers. During the Industrial Revolution, the late 1700s to early 1800s, many new kinds of technology were invented. The inventions allowed many jobs once done by hand to be done much faster and more easily by machines. Farmers began using machines to plant and harvest crops. Many small farmers who could not afford to buy the machines lost their jobs. Also, factories could produce items at a much lower cost than small home businesses. Because of these changes, many people in farming communities moved to cities and went to work in factories. Many factory employers paid workers as little as possible so their businesses could make more money. They paid workers low wages for what was often dangerous work. Recent immigrants and formerly enslaved people were very vulnerable to these employers and more likely to work in unsafe conditions for low pay. Tough jobs. Many workers in the 1800s got little time off work. The United States had no rules about how many hours people could work. Employers took advantage of these. The average factory worker worked 100 years a week. Workers who disliked these were easily fired and replaced. Child labor. Before the Industrial Revolution, children worked on family farms, in factories, and as assistants. The Industrial Revolution, however, caused an increase in child labor in factories. Children could run more factory machines. They could be paid less than adults and were easier to control. By the early 1800s, around 2 million children were working in miles of factories in the United States. The Industrial Revolution had shut down some of these families' businesses. Children often held jobs before age 10, sometimes as young as 6 or 7. They worked 6 days a week, up to 18 hours each day. Children often supported their families, with little time for rest and no time for school or play. Many children became ill from the dangerous working conditions and long hours. Workers joined together. Over time, workers began to join together to change things. They formed labor unions, groups set up to protect workers' rights. Labor unions bargained with employers for better hours, wages, working conditions, and benefits. Unions can call a strike to gain a stronger hand in talks with employers. During a strike, workers refuse to do any more work until changes are made. In 1869, President Ulysses S. Grant announced that government workers only had to work 8 hours each day. Soon after, an effort began to get a similar law passed for people working for private organizations. Women were mostly left out of the early labor movement. One big step forward for women's rights was when textile workers in New York City organized the Ladies' Garment Workers Union. They united with their male co-workers and proved that women were important to the labor movement. Labor unions today. Union membership across the United States has dropped since the 1980s. However, starting in 2020, strikes and unionizations upward have been rising. Unions for government workers are steadily growing. Teachers, postal workers, firefighters, and police officers all have strong unions. As of 2021, about 10.3% of workers in the United States are part of a union. Help from Congress. Progress happens slowly. The year 1938 was a turning point in the labor movement. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt listened to labor activists. As a result, Congress passed the Fair Labor Standards Act. Its purpose was to prevent employers from taking advantage of workers through low wages and poor working conditions. The act limited the work week to 44 hours, changed to 40 hours in 1940. It also set the minimum wages, the lowest wage employers were allowed to pay their workers. Minimum wage. When the Fair Labor Standards Act passed in 1938, the minimum wage was $0.25 per hour. That would be $5.03 today. In 2022, the U.S. minimum wage was $7.25 per hour. States are free to set it higher, and 30 states and Washington, D.C. have. The act also said that workers had to be paid extra when they work longer hours than usual or overtime. Workers earn 1.5 times their usual hourly rate for each hour of overtime they work. Overtime is each hour over 40 worked in a work week. Overtime pay was meant to keep employers from forcing people to work too many hours. It was also meant to encourage employers to hire more workers. The act also set safety rules in the workplace and banned many kinds of child labor. It set the minimum age for workers at 16 during school hours. 14-year-olds could work at certain after-school jobs, but workers had to be 18 for dangerous jobs. Math Minute. A worker's rate of pay is $15.00 per hour. How much does the worker earn in a 40-hour work week? How much do they earn in a week with 10 hours of overtime? Key people in the labor movement. Mother Jones, Mary Harris Jones, 1837 to 1930, helped coal miners in the early 1800s. Union members called her mother because of her hard work on behalf of the miners. She traveled across the United States to help striking miners and to end child labor. I. Philip Randolph, 1889 to 1979, was a widely known advocate for black working-class interests in the United States. He led a 10-year drive to organize the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. These workers took care of passengers' needs during train trips. Randolph also called for a march on Washington to protest employment discrimination in the armed forces. His commitment to non-violent protests and mass actions efforts helped inspire the civil rights movement of the 1950s to 60s. Eugene Debs, 1855 to 1926, helped found major labor unions for railroad workers and industrial workers. He ran for president 5 times between 1900 and 1920. But Debs traveled the country helping workers bargain with their employers. Dolores Huerta, born 1930, is the co-founder of the United Farm Workers Association. She focused her activist work on low-income families, women, and children. In 1965, Huerta helped organize a strike of 5,000 grape farmers. She helped negotiate a contract that provided safer working conditions. Now she travels the United States supporting campaigns and promoting equal rights legislation and policies. A new holiday. Labor Day was first celebrated in New York City in 1882. In 1887, Oregon became the first state to pass a law making Labor Day an official holiday. 30 more states passed similar laws before the U.S. government made Labor Day a federal holiday in 1894. Canada also celebrates Labor Day on the first Monday in September. More than 60 other countries around the world instead celebrate International Workers' Day on May 1st. Like Labor Day, International Workers' Day is a day for people to celebrate workers. On this day, labor activists educate people about their rights and work to stop unfair labor practices. A better future. Today, labor movements continue to improve the way workers are treated and paid. The COVID-19 pandemic, which arrived in the United States in early 2020, brought attention to healthcare, food service, and retail workers. To support these workers, many have called for a higher federal minimum wage. In 2022, the United States raised the minimum wage for federal workers in $15 an hour. For non-federal workers, minimum wage stayed at $7.25 an hour. On Labor Day, take a movement to honor the workers who build a better life for themselves and their community.